Welcome to Season 2 of Common Time Podcast. I'm David Clemmer.
And I'm John Pasquale.
And we're back to inspire and empower music educators with practical advice, thought-provoking conversations, and stories from some of the best in the business. Let's dive into another incredible episode. Our guest today is Brett Richardson. Welcome, Brett.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
It's going awesome. So Brett is the director of bands at Texas Lutheran, and he's also started a harmony music group in San Antonio. It's been highly successful. So we are really excited to talk with Brett today about all things chamber music. And John, why don't you get us started?
Indeed. Hey, Brett, how you doing, man?
Hey, good to see you, John.
Always good to see you, my friend. So, hey, I'm just going to kick things off. So, what are some key considerations when you're trying to form a chamber ensemble, whether either in an educational setting or a professional setting, or do you have any advice?
So I think one of the things we had to do is figure out what type of chamber music it would be, because you have all of this almost experimental, piano trios or all, people, all this, these instrumentations that are kind of unusual, or things that exist already. And we decided early on, I said, we're going to do basically the wind octet, the harmony, classical era harmony octet being our core, and then amplify out of that and live in that space for repertoire, not, this new thing written that has 8 cellos, 9 sarrusophones, and a piano. Like, we're not doing that, because the people that wanted to do this, we didn't play those instruments. None of them did. I didn't own them in my previous institution, so we were just going to live out of the wind octet plus flutes and bass. So that was a decision we made. So I think if you're asking for advice, it's see who's interested in the ensemble, and then use that instrumentation to get it going. And we happen to have pairs of oboes, clarinets, bassoons, and horns to really get it going.
Yeah, and there's so much repertoire, right? I mean, there's a ton of options.
Rodney Winther wrote that book, the chamber music rep book, and it's just tons.
Yeah, that's a great book that we should certainly point out for the listeners, because that is a great resource and it is a ton of music for chamber winds that I didn't even know about until probably in my master's degree, and then I didn't really look at it closely until my doctorate.
Yeah,
but anyone can look at this book. It's not just an educational resource. I mean, anyone can look through and look at all of this plethora of repertoire.
And that's actually that's what's happened for us is, there's all these different, not to just dig into the book itself, but what was really cool for us was that there's a whole section that's Rodney's 101 favorite works. Then there's all of the core rep, and then basically 8, 9, 10, 11, it goes, and then with different variations inside of that. And basically what I do before the season starts is I flip through and I go, what's that? Check. What's that? Check. And that's turned into how we discovered some of the pieces that we played this year. And so
Gotcha.
It's just fantastic. Yeah.
So I want to back up. We have some other questions that get into programming and stuff, but just I want to build off that just a bit. Yeah. What made you want to do this? What was the inspiration? Because there's not a lot of chamber ensembles out there now. And honestly, it's not a lot of chamber. Our state, we're in Texas, our state does have a solo and ensemble contest, but you don't really see chamber music being championed. So I'm just curious, what was your why? And go from there.
So, I actually, back to your solo and ensemble comment, I happen to judge that every year. Brad asked me to judge it, and I wish there was a wind octet section. Right. You're right, because I think, if you have some some of the really great high schools or even good middle schools, they have at least 2 oboes, 2 bassoons. You could do it if you wanted to. And I think they got rid of the medium ensembles, but whatever. So I wish that existed. But, I thought about this when I knew we were coming on the podcast today, that, Dave and I, you especially, we have shared history in lots of different little things in our lives, little chapters. And same people, we both, David Campo, we all, been, we were, so we had these shared little experiences. Well, basically, I was in my 4th year at the University of Incarnate Word, and I loved working there. We did some great work, and but it's a small liberal arts college. We basically had to rebuild a band program that had gone through some troubles, and so rebuilding this band program. And basically, there was only certain music we could do there with the players we had, and we're trying to make it work. And but I went through a job search at another institution, And when that, and it went really well, and it ended up being a job offer that we did not take. It just didn't work for our family.
Hmm.
And but it was a chance to do this really great music with these really great players. Well, that didn't materialize. And then that same year, when that search was happening, Kevin Sedtal asked me to be part of the Reynolds Conducting Institute at Midwest, the first year of it. I would say I was invited as a part of the original 12, but someone backed out, and so he had to go to the bench. And
Gotcha.
so I ended up going up to Midwest and being part of this really great conducting workshop where it wasn't just all the fresh master students looking for doctoral programs, that type of thing. It was
Right.
there were band directors who'd been teaching 20 years, and people from all different walks of life. So it's a really great thing that Kevin and Professor Reynolds had started. And I knew about all this music from master's degree and
Right.
doctoral program, all this stuff we take in rep class, but I've never really taught it. So we did the Bernard Divertissement, and we
Mm.
did one of the Strauss serenades with the
Hmm.
Michigan State Wind Ensemble, and
Right.
it was incredible. And so basically and I had talked about maybe starting this thing, when I first got to San Antonio, but nothing, like I said, nothing ever materialized. We just talked about it, but nothing ever happened. And basically the job search, or that job thing, not going well, and going through that conducting workshop, finally said, you know what, if we're going to do this thing, we're going to start it now. And we're going to and we had all the applied faculty at UIW who wanted to do it. And so we basically started off, well, we've got an oboe, we've got a great clarinet, we've got a conductor. Now we just got to find 5 more people, or 6 more people to make this work. We have to go find the horns. And so we held auditions that spring of 2019, and a lot of people came out because they saw what we were trying to do, and we
Right.
advertised, and we ended up putting a group together that was full of it's an all professional volunteer group.
Yeah.
So no one's paid, and they keep coming back because they like the music. So
I've considered starting one here in Houston, actually, and it's one of those things that it's on my list that I keep saying I know I
do
need
it,
to just
do
do
it,
it.
Dave, do it.
Okay, now I have a question for you before we move to the next thing, and it's you're obviously the collegiate level, and you're working with professional, semi-professional performers at
Yep,
this level.
yep,
Do you have thoughts on? You mentioned middle school and high school just a moment ago.
yep.
Do you have thoughts on how we might integrate that or bring chamber music into that world? Even something. I mean, obviously, we kind of dreaming here. Like, what in a perfect
Yeah.
world, what would it look like if we could? What are your thoughts?
So at TBA this past year, George Little, the president of TBA,
Mm-hmm.
asked us to actually do a presentation where the group came and played. But we actually talked about that. Excuse me. In a slide, we actually talked about
Right.
that. And one of the first things that we talked about was, one, you have to value it. You have to
Mm.
value, like you value marching band, like you value concert band, like you value fundraising, like you value the drumline playing for the opening of Whataburger. Whatever you value,
Whatever it is.
whatever it is in your job as a band director, you have to value that specifically. You have to value chamber music and individual or small group music. So you have to value that, one. And two, there's only so many hours in the day. There's only so many hours that they can meet on your campus. You have to decide, are we going to do jazz band this semester, or are we maybe going to do chamber music?
Chamber ensemble. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever that is, you have to decide, okay, this is how we're going to use that 0 hour before school, or maybe how we're going to use this. Or maybe you have I know some high schools that I'll go visit, they have an instrumental applied class for the
Mm-hmm.
kids to work on their region music. Well, maybe that's where you find all your good oboes, bassoons, and horns. And that's where they are. They're in that class already.
Yeah.
Well, instead of working on the region stuff, well, region's done in November. Well, let's use the last month and a half to read these Beethoven sextets or something. Or maybe you only have
Mm-hmm.
one bassoon, but a tenor sax in there. We'll write out the second bassoon part for tenor sax and have that. So I think it's a matter of valuing your time, valuing that you want to do it, and then finding a place to do it. And then, one, be willing to coach it and not be
Right.
afraid of that music. I think that might be kind of where you would get started.
Yeah. I think you're so right. The value aspect is, excuse me, is a really important. I have a former student, Robert Saladen. I don't know if you know Robert. He
Oh, yeah.
was
Yeah, sure.
he was at Leander, and I remember I had a conversation with with Robert. At the time, I think he was feeling burned out. If you're listening, Robert, I hope we get this right. But just the challenges of everything that happens with marching band directors and high school directors, like the weight of, especially in the fall. And I remember just briefly, brief discussions, like, ultimately you control that. You get to decide what you do, what you don't do. And he ended up adding a chamber music concert. And it was highly successful, as I remember. And I was inspired by it. I'm like, here's a person who's being highly successful with marching band at competitive level, but
Yeah.
decided it's really important. And it wasn't just important for the kids; it's important for him. Like to have this balance. So yeah, valuing it is awesome. So anyway, thank you.
I want to piggyback off one thing you said. It's not just important for the students or the players, but it's important for you. After every rehearsal, one of our principal clarinet is Don Biershank. If you know that name, Don he's one of the co-authors for Essential Elements.
Okay.
And he's the B in RBC Music in San Antonio.
I gotcha.
And so Don, and he was a meritorious award winner from TBA. So I mean, Don's great. Don's great. Great clarinetist, but also a fantastic person. He's my bud. And when we get done with every rehearsal, I might be a little scared going into it because I have to be on my game with these pros. Like I can't not, I can't not, y'all work with great musicians, but we get done with rehearsal and Don and I, we like give each other a hug and we're like, isn't this life-giving? Isn't this life? And we're like, yes. And it's every single time. And then that's what it's almost like going to Midwest or going to Team EA on a Tuesday night. It just recharges. And then I'm able to get into, where maybe I have a pep rally on a Friday, or I have something that's not as maybe artistically fulfilling, that I have, but it's part of my job that I have to do because I chose to be a band director, right? So I think that life-giving portion of finding that type of thing to do that for you is very important. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's also important to emphasize for our listeners that that the skills that the performers get in chamber music are different than in a large ensemble setting, and I would argue they are critical. I would say even more important in some instances, many instances actually, than in the large setting. So when I was teaching middle school at Griffin Middle School in the Colony, Texas, Louisville ISD, we did quite a bit of chamber music, and it was the expectation in our cluster that it was done. And the experience that the students got, I mean, it was unparalleled, and I was so thankful for it. So you do have to prioritize it. And I mean, I teach at the University of Michigan. We value large ensembles, small ensembles, chamber ensembles, athletic ensembles. And I think the health of our program is largely because of its vibrancy in all of those areas. But we have chamber music at the highest level. Like our symphony band players have a chamber winds component, but we also have a significant non-music major chamber program that about 300 students participate in. They form their own ensembles, they compose their own music, or they borrow it or kind of play something out there. And then we have a 2-hour concert every at the end of the term, and it's become this thing. And so every single person in the band program has experience in chamber music, but we also work hard at that, because we intensely value that. I think it's critical, right? So actually, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, and there's, and not only, well, one, this might be the only time I say this live on camera. Well, go Blue.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, like this, this year we were really excited to actually beat Michigan as an Indiana grad. But
y'all had a great season. It was so exciting. It was
great. But I'll say what I was about to say was, so it's not just all that other stuff you described. Don't forget the logistics of it. The TAs having to help with planning, like, well, we got to move these chairs. We're going to have to find this space, and we got to do, because it's not just a band concert. You go out, play 6 pieces, you're done.
No.
There's so many moving parts, and that might be another reason why people don't value it or don't want to do it, because, well, great, now we have to schlep these you have to go back and forth. It's like, do you understand that when the season's done, they may say the favorite piece they did was the Kataj Copley Nonette. They loved that. That's what they told me at the end of my. It's great, and it doesn't include double reeds. It's just like, so it's so great. So anyway,
actually, speaking of that repertoire, I think is a big reason why people don't really engage with it, because I would venture to say that the majority of people don't truly understand the depth of the canon that's
Mm,
available here, right? Because you
Mm.
have Mozart, you have Beethoven, you have so much more than that. Now, granted, that stuff is great because it's, it has been here through the test of time, right? But
hmm
there's so many really great things, and it can be whatever you want it to be. That's the best
Mm.
part. Like it could be for two oboes, airplane propeller, seven pianos, and a timpani. And you know what? And you're going to have a great concert, right? So speaking of that,
I think
how do you?
we should probably commission something like that, John.
Yeah,
Just
right.
the
We should.
airplane propeller. I haven't heard that one. So
So actually, the Georgian Thiel, right? Didn't
yeah.
he write the piece
Mhm.
for airplane propellers, right?
Yeah, he
Yeah,
wrote a bunch
Oh
of
yeah, yeah.
interesting.
he did.
I've never done any music, but I remember from class he was a percussionist, I think, or something, and he would write for experimental,
Yeah.
that type of
Yeah.
thing. So
When I was teaching a study abroad class in Vienna, I took the students to go see Barenboim do a chamber recital with and it was Ann Thiel's. At least I think it was Ann Thiel. It had 8 sets of timpani and 8 harps. That was the piece, and it
Wow.
was an hour long, and it was incredible. Anyway, so anything is
Interesting.
possible,
Yeah.
but so going off of that, how do you approach or how do you go about selecting repertoire that's going to be one engaging to the students or performers, but
hmm
also the audience because they're going to buy the tickets or they're going to want to go and see it. So how do you do that?
that is probably one of the most interesting parts about this project that we do
Hmm.
with the Harmony Group is one, we decided early on that, well, we have a programming philosophy that basically I adapted from something I learned from my mentor, Fred Allen. And that is, we have core rep that we play, which is everything is, we try to have at least one classical era wind octet on every
Mm.
concert because that's historically where it comes from. That's our DNA. So there's that.
Right.
Then we try to find music that includes the plus, which is the French influence of the flutes, and then the added double bass that you would have, or the contrabassoon. So we kind of go that way. So there's the double woodwind quintet. That's another kind of thing that we do to choose. Then we try to find music that maybe features some of our players. Like we just did the lead at Scherzo by Florence Schmidt on our last concert, featuring our principal horn, and he did a great job. And so there's that aspect. And then music bought from the 20th and 21st centuries, so newer music written for that
Mhm.
type of ensemble, if you can find it. And then music by underrepresented composers and gender identities, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
So we have those kind of things that kind of guide what we do. And then it's like plug and play and see what fits, find out, well, who's around on this concert, because it's almost like the Dallas Winds. We have a kind of a rotating set of personnel at times based on what the San Antonio Phil is doing. Well, a lot of our players play in the San Antonio Phil and Mid Texas Symphony or this, and so they're kind of jobs they get paid for,
Right.
and so they we try to do that and then figure out what we're going to play. I try to pick every year like what is going to be our big masterworks for the year, so I know that that's kind of what we build the concerts around. And this year it was the Bernard Divertissement in the fall, and then lead at Scherzo this spring. One year we did Grand Partita, and I chose, and we've done all three Mozart serenades. And the reason why we chose the Grand Partita wasn't because it's just great music. I mean, and I had never done it before. I mean, it just is it's a
Mhm.
museum piece to me. Um, but I needed to figure out a way to include more horns in our pool of horn players, and how to include a bass. Give us a
Right.
reason to audition for those groups. Well, let's play Grand Partita, and now I need to go find two more horns and another bass player, and that's how we found our bassist, who stayed with us since then. And so you find that masterwork, go from there, and then it's been really neat to find these unique pieces that kind of fit around that, and then hopefully it's something attractive enough for people to come to see.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so
You know,
great.
because oh,
Go
sorry,
ahead. No.
sorry.
So go, John.
No, I was just going to say because the audience, some people want to hear the classics, right?
Yeah.
Some people want to hear Stravinsky. Some people want to hear him with concert music. Like, I mean, trying to do that's really, I bet
Yeah.
it's really difficult.
Well, and the one thing that we've discovered with our audiences, and we're really in the process of audience building. We don't play for large audiences. We don't have a subscription series. We're free concerts. I mean, we really function like a community band, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term, but we are the exact opposite of a community band. Um, but honestly, the audiences come in, and I think they come to support their friends, or they come to they know it's a concert and it's free. They don't
Right.
even know what they want to hear. They just come, and then we end up almost like it's a showcase of whatever this music is for this group that we've
Hmm.
picked. And that's kind of what ends up happening, except for when, we decided to do either Grand Partita, or we did the 13 instrument version of Appalachian Spring. Like that was, we used the winds from the group and then had some string friends come in and
Right.
play, So like that's when you might attract some people in that way. But then they're like, what is the Wind Octet by Alice Ping Yi Ho? What is that? Like, and they don't know. And I said, I didn't know 6 months ago, but now I
Right.
do.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I'm gonna have to go look that one up now.
it's really interesting because it's a wind octet, but it's not the classical. It's like two flutes, one oboe, two clarinets, one bassoon, two horn. It's this kind of
Yeah.
unique version of like, let's take some of the wind dectet and make this thing. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting. About 10 minutes long. Canadian, Chinese Canadian composer. She's really nice. It's just this, but from 1980.
Yeah.
I think it might have been a doctoral project or something, and it ends up being really interesting. So anyway,
That's fantastic. Just talking about chamber music I don't listen to enough chamber music. I just don't. And I'm like, you just mentioned a couple of pieces that I don't know, and then a couple that I love. You mentioned the Grand Partita 2 years ago. Chicago Symphony did a Grand Partita, and
yeah,
I saw it like
yeah,
excuse me, advertised on Facebook,
yeah,
and I bought tickets. Like
yeah.
we're going to Chicago
Yeah.
next week,
We're gonna go
Teresa.
do it.
Like we're gonna go see this, and it was the most. I can't tell you how beautiful that piece is, played by those players.
Oh,
But then
sure.
my first doctoral recital was Verez Octandra, and like,
Oh, yeah.
man, I haven't even thought about this in a long time, but this music is so exciting. So okay, so in terms of programming, I'm curious. Are there uh, unique challenges though that you have to face compared to large ensemble orchestra
Mhm.
programming? How do you deal with that?
So let's talk about some real challenges. Like a real challenge is, if I had a community band and we had 90 players and one of the trombones doesn't come because they have a doctor's appointment or something, we just work around it.
Right.
But not with this. If someone looks at the rehearsal schedule and they go, Brett, I'm playing on Beethoven 9 with the San Antonio Phil on this one rehearsal, because we finally have figured out our formula is 2 rehearsals, a dress, and then 2 concerts. And then we put it together in that amount of time. We probably need one more rehearsal, but we just can't start committing that type of time. And one less is definitely not enough. So if someone says I can't make it to this one, I basically have to go, well, we need to find someone else, because we need everybody there for every single rehearsal, because there's 8, at the most 12 people or 11 people.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the biggest challenges, is like, you have to have the warm body who can play Petite Symphony by Gounod,
Mm-hmm.
or the 12th Mozart Serenade, or the bassoons that can play La Notte de Figaro on, taco, 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 on those repeated, like you have to have those people there who are committed and want to play it. And so that might be the biggest challenge in terms of that. And then looking at the music, like, can we put this together in that amount of time? Like, there are some experimental things, like you're talking about George Antil, or you're talking about Verez, or sorry, I'm
Yeah.
like doing this in front of the camera. Like, that helps. That really helps the podcast. Um, maybe you can't do it. Maybe you can't do those pieces, and that is a limit. But like you're talking about, this music is so great. If you have these really great players and there's so much you can find. So right now we're still in the process of going through Rodney's 101. We've done 16 of the 101. There's so
Mm.
much that we can do. So we don't feel like there's any limits at all. Like, nothing really is limiting us to play it. But I think those might be some of the biggest challenges right off the bat.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and it's a totally a different set of challenges in every way, right?
but
which is
exciting ones.
awesome. They are exciting, and they're also like, "Urgh." There was I was doing a piece, a pretty substantial piece. It was new, with the Michigan Symphony Band chamber winds, and it was manuscript, and
Yeah.
we had 5 rehearsals, and the composer came to the penultimate rehearsal and the dress. So we do the penultimate rehearsal, all's going great. We get to the dress, and he's like, saxophones, why are you playing from square B to G a half step off? Hmm? He's like, can you transpose that? I'm like, stop. We're not doing that. And by the way, you wrote it
Oops.
and you didn't realize it. And by the way, our saxophone studio at Michigan is off the charts good,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
silly good.
Yeah.
And so they can play. So it isn't like they're playing wrong notes, right?
No.
Just the composer didn't realize that how they wrote it was, anyway. Those kinds of challenges are always really fascinating, especially when
Yeah.
you're dealing with very thin instrumentation, right? Or very responsible solos.
One thing, so for instance, you start thinking about our masterworks for this type of ensemble, and we probably have all heard of Eugene Boza's Octanphony.
It's
Mhm.
great.
You know it from the list, or maybe you've explored it and all that kind of stuff, right? Okay. Well, we played it, and I know, and it's like, we're gonna play it, and we have the flutes to play it. Like we're gonna do this piece, and it was really great by the time we were done. The current edition of it, the one you can buy from the famous French, whatever is the publishing company, editions, the second movement, all of the rehearsal numbers are off by 8 or something like
Yeah,
that.
they're
It's
off.
all a
gotta love
handwritten
it.
score,
Uh-huh.
off by some, and then I can't remember. I'm going off the top, but then in the third movement, there's another issue like that.
Yeah.
And I want to go, this piece is on everybody's list. And there's Mike Haithcock's lists for band, and there, boom, Octanphony. Well, it should be on there. It's a great piece.
It is.
It's kind of not in good shape. It needs to be kind of fixed up. Someone needs to call Mark Rogers and say, hey, man, can you fix this up for us so we can have a modern edition to
Right.
play? And it's like, no, don't, because I need something to, help get tenure. That'll be my project, right?
There you go.
But anyway, it's that type of thing. The composer or the editor, they do this. And here we are with these great players trying to decipher our way through it. It's incredibly adventurous and exciting because no one else within a 80-mile circle from San Antonio, you start getting to UT Austin, they're probably playing it up there. But outside of that, no one else is really playing this stuff. So
it's true.
So it's on us to make sure we do it right.
Yeah.
So then, Brett, I'm just going to change topics just a tad and talk about the educational setting. How can chamber music enhance students' musicianship and overall ensemble awareness and experience?
I love that question because I think it goes back to why public school educators should really value chamber music in some form, and even in the existing version that we have in Texas, the solo and ensemble process. So if you value it and it's something that's really, that is something that they can use that activity to work on these things, which is, think about all the things we say in rehearsal. We get to, let's say, a solo, and it's marked piano because that's what the composer has marked, but they play it and it's out of tune, or maybe they don't have a characteristic sound or something like that. And you're telling them, play more confidently. That's a solo piano, so play more mezzo forte. And when you get to the top of this phrase, you should really do this kind of shape, or add vibrato on this long note. All these things that you're telling them in the large ensemble are things they could work on in small group. How to tuning. There's 10 clarinets. Well, I guess I'm in tune. I kind of think we've averaged out, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when I have 2 clarinets, you either hear the waves or you don't. And are we in tune or not? And is that something we're using chamber music to help describe? Expressive intonation versus maybe pure intonation. What are we doing with the leading tone, or what are we doing with the second scale degree going to 1 in terms of a solo or in terms of So there's so much individual musicianship and confidence building that could be completed in chamber music, like how to breathe and start together without having. So I'm telling you, when I judge solo and ensemble, inevitably there's a group that comes in maybe from a smaller school, and they're always, they're tapping their toe to start every ensemble, tapping their toe, and they count it off, and then they come in and the tempo's not right, and God bless them. I'm glad they're there doing it, and but
Yeah.
maybe we could have worked on just going, bah, yeah, just move the like kind of like take the first trumpet in a brass quintet
Yeah.
and like do a little bit, conduct each other in, like work on that skill. Um, I think that's what we need to figure out is like, well, I heard a phrase from a mentor that was passed down a long time ago, and that is, if you want to be considered a good conductor, conduct good players. And when I first heard that, I was like, wow, I need to go, because I was about to take the job with Steve Smith, John. I was about to go
Mhm.
teach with Steve at Downing. And I was like, okay, so we're going to go. I need to create good players. I need to be a good beginner teacher. I need to do these things and da 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 da. And then much later, after I taught for a while, I realized, well, no, you just need these really awesome players.
It
And then
helps.
people think
Does
that,
make a
right, that
difference.
it does help. It
It
does help.
helps, but
Yeah.
I do think, speaking of Professor Reynolds, who
I was gonna
I
say
think
he was the one that said
I
that.
think he's the
Okay,
one
there you
that
go.
said that,
Yep.
but
Yep.
also David and I, for our book, we were and some other things that the three of us have done.
Yep.
He was telling us that, and ever since he said it, David, you probably remember this. I think about this every day, that he was saying to us that not many students really and truly understand what is coming out of their bell. What they
Yeah.
think is coming out of their bell and the reality of that is
Mm.
coming out of their bell are totally different things, right?
Mhm.
And so if I'm in a section of 12 clarinets, it isn't as obvious. But in chamber music, you have to know, because it's so much more sparse and thin. And, it's, so
Yeah.
I think about that a lot when he said that, because it's genius, actually, because it's true.
It's I think one of the biggest parts of, not just of all the, like, the pedagogical, playing with a really great sound and the vowel of what you're doing and the quality of your read. It's what do we do to help the players be more confident
Yeah.
to know what's coming out of their bell. I love the fact that you said that, because it's like that's exactly what it is. Do you know what's coming out of your instrument?
Like,
Or you just,
like
or is it,
really,
Right.
really
like,
know.
do you
Not
really
what
know,
you
or do you?
think.
No, exactly, because we all know that, even, as we're all conductors, so that idea of like, I think I'm showing this. Well, here's what shows up in my hand. Well, here's what comes out of the instruments. Here's what the audience hears. There's a loss of information through that whole process, and going from the player's head to what's coming out of their bell, especially if they're not really attuned to that. That's exactly right. And chamber music is a place where they hear themselves by themselves in that
Right.
moment, and then they go like, oh man, I really need to do this, or I need to play it this way, and then, oh, if I'm going to blend with this color over here, I really should be this dynamic versus. And
That's
maybe that's where
exactly
they can
right.
learn that. Yeah.
Exactly. I was just thinking that, and we're in the state of Texas. I would say we largely focus on fundamentals a lot, and not that that's a bad thing. It's a good thing. I'm
Nope,
I'm
it's a good thing.
glad that we do. Some other places do less, and they probably need a little bit of that. And what they're doing, we probably need a little bit. There's a balance in there, but I will say all of the things that lend itself to a high level of fundamental excellence are exposed in chamber music. Like, you can hear it, you can identify it immediately. Students can hear it. It really is a good laboratory for teaching a lot of the conceptual things. And I think sometimes I'm this is an opinion, but I believe
Sure.
sometimes we shy away from it because we need time to do these other things. Like, well, this would be a great opportunity to give students, because then they are having to rise to a level of the people around them, but because you can't sit back, you can't hide in the section. You literally have to
Okay.
be.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless of the level of player, you could do this with a third band.
Mm-hmm.
Now the repertoire would have to be obviously less difficult, but you can still work on those concepts. And I'm just thinking out loud, in my brain, like, how cool would it be if we had these opportunities for students to be engaging with each other in a way that's more collaborative, which brings me kind of my next question, which is, how do you approach, or how do you suggest approaching collaboration between performers, but then also composers and sort of conductors? Because that opens up, it's a very different than being in the large ensemble, as we were kind of
Yeah.
alluding to.
Yeah. One thing I want to, yes, to answer your question, like, oh, I want to get to that. I do want to say one thing about the last thing you said,
Sure.
which was, think about how many band programs think, well, I'm going to play this piece because I need to challenge my saxophones to make them better for marching band next year. They kind of work their way to that. Well, think about at the end of the year, you know that your seniors are graduating, so your junior trumpet has to step up or your junior. Well, let's
Hmm.
put them in a chamber group
Hmm.
at the end of the spring, you know, coach them, get them good, teach them these really great skills in where they're by themselves and exposed, have them play it, you know, in May at the State Solo Ensemble,
Right.
and then it kind of sparks that leadership individual playing thing and gets them
Yeah.
ready for, so like that is spot on. That's one, but again, it comes to, will you value it? You know, how many times
Right.
have we heard you get done with solo and ensemble in February, and when do they touch that? I'm not,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not throwing stones, but I'm just saying that that's so. But in terms of collaboration, one thing that's benefited us in our group is, there are some organizational things that I have to do as a top down as the conductor and artistic director for it. You know, picking music or website design or something like that. You know, and that's fine. I like doing that. That's a kind of a project, et cetera, et cetera. But in the rehearsal, I've made a conscious choice to never think of myself as conductor and then the player, where it's me and then them. It's, I almost view, like, if we could rehearse in the circle all the time, I would. As
Hmm.
we are, as like we're like, I'm a player with them, where I'm a facilitator of what they are doing,
Right.
and that as a conductor, I allow, and it's really tough because we all want to fix and like jump in as soon as we give the release, and then like I'm going to allow the two oboes who play together all the time in this local symphony to talk to each other and say, hey, I think this articulation needs to do this, and I allow that space to occur where they can talk about that, and then I go, okay, and then I'd say, hey, is there anything that you shared that would benefit all of us, you know, and
I
try to,
love
you know,
this. I love it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's when we we all, because I think good players have been around a lot of bad conductors and people that have bad rehearsals, and
Yeah.
they don't like it, but they do it because they're getting paid and it's their job. But then what we find out is like, well, there's no pay here. This is actually costing you time to be a part of our group. So why do you keep coming back? And I think what it is we keep it all about the music, which is part of the collaboration. It's always all about the music. It's not about what check we're getting. And then two, they know that they can contribute in the rehearsal, that they, you know, it's, I'm not going to squash that, or that, you know, that tempo, like maybe I chose a tempo to begin with. And I think we all realize we need to go about 12 clicks slower. Okay, I think it's a great idea. Let's try that. I think we all like that. It still has
Hmm.
forward motion, etc. And so when that happens and that free discussion is there, and we're able to ask questions, but we're also able to stay on time in rehearsal,
Right.
and their time is valued. I don't hold them over, etc. Then that's when I feel that kind of clicks in
Yep.
terms of the collaborative nature of it.
I want to. So we had Todd Dixon on a couple
Yeah,
of weeks
Todd.
ago, and we
Yeah.
talked about. I love Todd. Todd talked about the culture that he creates in his large ensemble rehearsals. And this
Mm-hmm.
is like synopses are flying
Yeah.
off my
Yeah.
brain right now, because one of the things he says, there's no gotcha moments in those rehearsals, and he creates
Mm,
this level of trust in the ensemble that they can talk to each other. Now he guides the listening, but they're talking to each other about the outcomes. And I'm thinking, like, this is what happens in chamber music all the time. Like in chamber music, if you have someone that's allowing it, like you are, like you do allow the oboes to take a moment to
hmm.
discuss what happened there. Okay, can you share that with us? And just allowing for that to occur in a rehearsal. I love collaboration, but I think it's just so healthy. And it's something that we're kind of talking about chamber music, and then how does this work within a large ensemble? And I'm just thinking about band directors. It Some of them are probably thinking like, well, how do I have time to value this? I don't know, but making time to value it, the outcomes here could be so fantastic, just in how they collaborate, how they listen. Is the first clarinet that just followed the first oboe, they came in at such a different volume? Did they recognize that was a mismatch? Those kinds of
Right.
things that we do that in the large ensemble, but man, their responsibilities in the collaboration and connection can be just, I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you think, well, well, think about this, like the three of us speaking right now and just kind of visiting
Right.
about this. It's so much easier with the three of us versus 30 of us.
Yeah,
So
that's a good
there's
point.
that. The
That's
fact
a
that
good
we can
point.
have this conversation is much easier in this format. Well, if you want to maybe, and I've never thought of this till now, but maybe if you want, and now I was like, I can't wait to go back to school on Monday and maybe start implementing some of these things. But the idea of maybe in a chamber setting, teaching them how to collaborate in this way so that they then could do it in a large ensemble. So, I mean,
Right.
there's that thing.
And making them more
And then this,
comfortable to do it. Just
oh
the
yeah, because they
feeling that
already
they
know how.
can do it. Yeah.
You've cultivated that skill within them, how to communicate, how to, we with our music ed majors, when we're in their secondary methods class, one of the things the phrase I use a lot is, you have to talk about music. You have to talk about it. Like, how do you use the words to talk about what you do? And so we have to do that. And then the second thing is it goes back to that value comment. And my mother-in-law, I love her. She's great. I married into a great family, and she's wonderful. And she's got all these bits of advice. And one of the things that she says is like, you always value you will do what you choose to value, or whatever you want to do, you'll do it. You'll choose to do it if you want to do it. You want to go make a
Yeah.
tea time and play golf, you'll go do that. Or if you want to go start your chamber group or mow the yard, you'll go do that. But if you don't, if you're like, I don't want to do it, well, then you're not going to do it.
Right.
And that means something else is going to get your time and effort, but this other thing won't. That might, I don't know, maybe it doesn't apply to being played at a football game, or maybe it doesn't apply to your July 4th parade, but it could really make your concert band better if you do it. And it's a matter of choosing.
I mean, I do think that it is important to acknowledge that that there are so many things that are vying for
For our
the
time.
time of
Yeah.
teachers, right? So
Yeah.
this, I mean, we aren't being flippant
No.
or
No,
naive
not
in saying,
at
well,
all.
you just have to do right. So, I mean, we totally get it. We've all been there, right? It's just, I mean, there has to be a way. So I'm going to ask the last question before we kind of transition.
Yeah.
What advice do you have then for teachers listening, going, how do I do this? How do I establish this? How do I maintain it and make it sustainable? I mean, I understand that it's important and I value it, but how do I do it? So what do you think about that?
There's, when you're in English class, because I remember this, and John, I think you'll appreciate this. I remember being in the band office with Steve.
Oh, by the
And
way, shout out to Steve Smith, huh?
I mean, Steve Smith is the best. Love Steve.
Taught
But
me everything I know. I can't stand him, but
changed my
I love you, Steve.
he changed my life.
Mine
2 years
too.
teaching with him changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
But we're teaching middle school band in Flower Mound, and on the wall in our band office, next to the door, the exit in out of our office, was the pullout schedule for every student based on their star score, or whatever it was at the time, test, I guess star test, whatever the scores are, and the pullouts for math and all this. And are they being pulled out of English? Or no, they're not. They're not being pulled out of those classes, but they are being pulled out of whether or not that's supposed to happen or not. That's another talk for another day.
Right.
But it was. So my point that I'm trying to get to is there's only so much time. And so my advice would be is choosing, maybe as part of your existing concert schedules, say that we are going to do this portion is going to be chamber music, and maybe find, instead of in this week, we don't do sectionals over concert band music, maybe we do it on this other thing. Maybe we have a class where we all play the same piece but different movements. So we all play it together, but then on the concert, we only play, I will say, out of COVID, all of the flex music that, it's always been there. That's my joke about Tealman Susato, is that he's the OG flex composer. And
That's so true.
Which is very true. So there's all that, that type of thing. So finding the right music to fit, and then taking what you have, the existing time, and saying, well, we're just not going to do the meeting about, I don't know, maybe we won't do an extra leadership session. Maybe we will do this chamber music thing. It's, I think it's making the choice that, and I think realizing that it's going to be okay. It's good. Everything's going to be fine. You don't have to have that extra Monday night rehearsal to work on part 4 of the show after you've already gone to UIL, says someone who doesn't do marching band anymore. But again, coming back to knowing that in the overall holistic approach of developing the student musician, that it will be okay if you find that time out of that. Maybe you choose one day of a week where that's going to be chamber music time and something else than
Right.
something else. Maybe,
Yeah.
it's really tough. It's really tough
It
to
is.
figure that out. But if you value it, you'll find it. That's
You will.
the point.
And for any of our listeners who are teaching smaller programs, this is a perfect opportunity. I judged a marching band this past fall, and I gave it one of the highest scores I've ever given any marching band on the field ever, and it had 30 players.
Wow.
It was fabulous, and because it was chamber winds,
Yeah.
on the move,
yeah, literally.
and
yeah.
every player had to step up. They had to contribute, and it was wonderful. So if any of you come from smaller programs, you can get creative with this, right? Like even sectionals. When I was teaching middle school, I used to do chamber winds in sectionals. So we would have 2 flutes, 2 clarinets as a sectional group. Now, granted, we were rehearsing, full ensemble music, but it was still, you can't hide when it's
the small
just
group.
like that, right? It's the same exact skill set, right?
Yeah.
Your
and
story,
that's
John.
actually. Oh, sorry. Go, please.
No, I was going to say your story, John, makes me think of I think this was 2 years ago at State Solon Ensemble. This trombone quartet, all female trombone quartet, comes in, and it was outstanding. I can't even remember what they played, but it was, if I could give the outstanding performer award to small groups because it's only for soloists, I would have done that. It was outstanding. And it was just quality sounds. And it looked like they were going to the International Trombone Association trombone choir. It was, and I go, where are you from? And they're like, Winsboro, Texas. Like, if you know where that is. And I don't. I think it's a 3A maybe up in the northeast corner of Texas. And I said, who's coaching you? Nobody. They're just doing it because they like it and they're friends with each other and they're the trombone section of the band. And they just, it was like, it could have been from a 6A high school playing at Midwest. It's like one of those kinds of things. I couldn't believe it. And the point of telling that story, just like you judging that marching band, is that it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's possible that and the students actually like it. We got in the fall of my first year at TLU, we played some pretty great band rep. One of their favorite pieces was the Copley chamber winds that we did. They just loved it because it was really challenging, and it's because of the small group. So yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off that. So,
Brett, what a fantastic conversation. I'm so glad that that you reached out to me actually and said, "Hey, what do you think about talking about this?" And I immediately was like, "Yeah, we should talk about this." And
yeah,
it's not something I've talked about in a while, and I don't think a lot of people are talking about. But I think we've uncovered today some strategies that, like, everyone does sectionals. Everyone does sectionals. Hey, splitting the sectionals up into, instead of like instruments, do a wind octave. Finding ways to still rehearse your music, but in a setting that looks a little different, creates a listening responsibility and also the opportunity for them to collaborate and talk. And then you can move that back into the full rehearsal and get people more comfortable in that. Man, what a cool opportunity. Again, if you value that. And I think another thing I'm going to throw out for our listeners, like, sometimes you have to take a musical risk, and if you might be uncomfortable, like, I don't know what will happen. That doesn't mean you shouldn't. Like, I really don't. I mean, take that risk and allow your students, because I've been teaching a long time. Students have never let me down. Like, students always come through. If you provide the opportunity and empower them, they nail it. They always do.
And also, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? It's not going to sound great. It's not like you're going to remove the wrong arm, right? Or it isn't like you're going to, it isn't like the world's going to stop spinning. Take the risk. Just do it.
Such a cool thing.
I was about just to leave y'all with this. Like, I think about the fact that our first concert with the Harmony group could have just been, La Notte di Figaro, Mozart Serenade, and then we never met again. And in fact, COVID happened the following spring after we got started. So it could have shut it down. But the fact that we took the risk, kept talking about it, valued it, came back, and 6 years later, we're still going.
Here we are.
So
Yeah.
the taking the risk thing is huge.
Yeah, I love it. So there's a couple of questions we always ask our guests, and
Okay.
not necessarily particular to the topic. So is there a book, or it could be books, that have
Yeah.
inspired you in your journey? It doesn't even have to be musical, but things that, you could share with our listeners, like, hey, this is something that's meant something to me, and maybe it'll help you.
You know, I would be a poser if I would say that I read a lot.
No,
My
no
wife,
worries.
I know, I'm just being honest. My wife would go like, "You need to read more," and so, and she's absolutely right. But probably related to is that Winther chamber text.
Yeah.
Like, it's really great because of the resources. Because even if you don't play that music, you discover a composer that you may go find, and then discover something else about
Sure,
them.
absolutely.
Yeah, so there's that. And then probably the On Teaching Band by Eddie Green
Yeah.
that Mary Ellen Cavett put together.
Yeah,
Some
absolutely.
really great thoughts in that. That was good to spend time
Right.
with. So
Yeah.
those two.
I'll be honest with you as well, Brett. I don't read nearly as much as I need to. And I think part of that is you get done with your doctorate, you're like, I'm tired of reading. I will never open another book in my life.
And
But
then we wrote a book, and then we're like,
and then you write a
Nope.
book, it takes 5 years. You're like, I'm never doing it again.
never touching one again.
I'm not gonna read them, but I am gonna write them. It's like,
yeah. So any case, yeah. All right, John, you got the last one.
I have the last one, Brett, and I would argue it's the most important of all the questions that we've asked you today.
Yeah.
So, what's your favorite time signature?
Oh my gosh, that's a fantastic question. That's awesome. I love that. I'm gonna go 7/8.
It's becoming quite popular.
It is really popular.
It's very popular answer.
And do we get to say why, or do we
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
say
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
I think it's one, if you think about it, it can exist in many different forms. We really see it in 3 different ways, depending on how it's grouped. It's a lot of fun to conduct. And when students, musicians especially, experience it for the first time, and it's not a duple time signature, it's that kind of funky float, flick, float, that type of thing, and they go, wow, music's not always in B flat and 4/4. It's that they kind of see the light go on in them when they, when you play Armenian dances for the first time, and it has the 5 alternating 5/8. That's always really cool, and it's a lot of fun to conduct.
It is that for sure. So, well, Brett, that's all the time we have for today, but I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us and inspiring. Like, I feel more inspired. I'm going to go listen to some chamber music this afternoon, especially the boats. I conducted that a long time ago, and I'm like, man, I just have to I want to rehear that. It's been so long. So thanks so much for your time. We appreciate you. And we appreciate everything you've added today.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Common Time Podcast. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and we'd love it if you shared with your friends as well. We'll see you next time, but until then, keep making music and keep making a difference.